Some chase fame, others catch lightning, but Sean Combs didn't chase and he didn't catch. He built the storm. As of May 2025, Combs faces a series of federal charges, including racketeering, sex trafficking, and conspiracy. These allegations remain under active investigation and trial. What follows is based on sworn testimony, publicly filed documents, and corroborated evidence to date. Sean Combs didn't enter rooms, he recalibrated them. Conversations didn't falter from star-struck awe, but because the air itself seemed to constrict. Something entered that didn't glow. It gauged. People didn't admire Sean Combs. They measured him. Posture to pause, glance to grin. Every detail read like data in motion. His charm wasn't warm, it was coded. A smile that never reached the eyes, less a welcome than a diagnostic. You didn't feel seen, you felt scanned. What followed him wasn't applause. It was adjustment. Every gesture felt rehearsed, every smirk deliberate. The laughter didn't fade, it thinned. Picture this, the pulse of bass, champagne haze, synthetic joy, stitched through silk and smoke. Then he arrives, and everything shifts. Laughter retracts, smiles flatten. You don't know why, but the back of your neck tightens. It isn't intimidation, it's intrusion wrapped in velvet. You don't stop dancing, you just start watching. He didn't need to speak, he simply observed, and everyone knew they were being processed. He wasn't just a face in hip-hop's pantheon. He engineered the soundboard, mapped the blueprint, made the music not just a vibe, but a business model. Bad Boy wasn't a label, it was an algorithm, designed to dominate. Raised in Harlem, robed in luxury, Combs didn't walk through doors. He constructed his own. Every move was premeditated, every silence scripted. From late-night studio sessions to billion-dollar brand deals, this wasn't evolution, it was execution. A system built, deployed, and constantly upgraded like firmware. He wasn't building culture, he was coding it. Because behind the velvet ropes and orchestrated spectacle, the empire might have been something else. What resembled legacy was often choreography, meticulously crafted illusions hiding circuitry and command. Publicly, he was charisma incarnate. Privately, he was control.
Is there anything that you may want to confess tonight before you go in?
I keep everything right here. There you go. Or right here.
There you go.
Revolt, Bad Boy, Sean John, Cîroc. On the surface, accolades. Beneath, architecture. These weren't ventures. They were insulation. Less elevation, more containment. Their role wasn't growth, it was redirection. The deeper you explored, the more deliberate it felt. No disruption, no error, just tempo. Measured, structured, composed. A silence not for comfort, but for surveillance. Not discretion, conditioning. Guests thought they were insiders. In truth, they were entries, cataloged, archived, categorized. You didn't walk into a brand, you walked into a scanner lined in luxury. And the cost of admission? Your silence. This is Grimvault, where silence doesn't mark the end of a narrative. It signals activation. And now that signal is blaring. Some of the entities once embedded in that construct are retreating, carefully, without sound, with polished erasure. Brand names slip off pages. Affiliations dissolve without comment, not out of ignorance, but exposure. What Combs assembled wasn't fleeting. It was built for reverberation, long past the arrival of reckoning. In her opening address, Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson reframed the narrative. This isn't tabloid controversy. It's institutional exploitation, strategic, prolonged, and protected. Central to the case, two women, Cassie Ventura and another whose identity remains sealed. Their testimony sketches a decade of systemic harm, psychological dominance, enforced submission, threats engineered for silence. He had the power to ruin her, Johnson told the jury, describing Ventura's career under Combs' influence. And the prosecution insists that power wasn't dormant, it was deployed. Sean Combs, formerly Puff Daddy, later Brother Love, now appears in court stripped of persona, facing charges of racketeering, sex trafficking, and conspiracy. Prosecutors describe a machine in motion for 15 years, powered not by talent alone, but by manipulation, image, and intimidation. Since proceedings began in May 2025, testimony has emerged from behind screens and under protection. What they reveal isn't a string of indiscretions, it's a structure. Authority masked as mentorship. Encounters filmed without consent. Leverage stored in cloud-based compartments. This evidence doesn't murmur, it detonates. But the explosion doesn't light up headlines. It lives in digital folders, time-stamped recordings, buried code. What agents unearthed wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Luxury masquerading as security, control camouflaged as comfort. His estates were performance zones, wired, lit, and rigged. Beneath polished interiors, concealed chambers, encrypted assets, archives categorized by vulnerability, not name. One label arrested attention: coverage, high risk. Footage depicted bedrooms, corridors, studios, tracked and classified, not for defense, for control, not for record, for leverage. These weren't defenses, they were traps. What began as questions became excavation. Behind the glamour was a vault, not of gold, but of data. Footage filed, labeled, rated by risk, a museum of manipulation. These weren't accidental recordings, they were planned extractions. So ask yourself, who installs surveillance in bedrooms without a plan for power? The footage wasn't incidental, it was calculated. A system built to observe, wrapped in opulence, hiding in open view. Guests believed they were stepping into safety. Velvet-lined luxury, guarded entrances, whispers of exclusivity. But safety was a mirage. Behind the polished floors and designer silence, something else waited. Observation, not protection. Cameras blinked quietly in the background, not for security, for storage. Every move, every slip, every secret moment was recorded. Human data mined under strobe lights and champagne foam. For Ventura, what began as a relationship quickly calcified into captivity, a decade not of love, but of psychological warfare. She described drugs being introduced not recreationally, but operationally, a tool to quiet, to disarm, to control. Violence wasn't spontaneous, it was punctuation, a full stop when silence wasn't enough. These weren't wild parties or consensual escapades, they were stage-managed rituals, painfully choreographed, deliberately recorded, and designed to humiliate. According to Cassie Ventura's sworn testimony, these events weren't invitations, they were summons. Executed with psychological precision and veiled threat, she spoke of being forced into graphic sexual acts, often while under the influence of drugs allegedly introduced not for pleasure, but control. The abuse wasn't random, it was patterned, punctuated by violence and filmed for leverage. Behind the luxury, there was always a lens. Behind the music, a script. Her voice cracked as she described the aftermath, being told how to dress, what to do, how to smile when the cameras were off. It felt like I was a product, she said, like a sex worker with no say in my own body. March 2016, the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles. A hallway carved from polished stone, clean, gleaming, silent. But the silence is about to rupture. Surveillance cameras catch more than motion, they capture menace. Sean Combs appears, barefoot, a towel loose around his hips. No hesitation, no confusion, just aim. He isn't chasing, he's hunting. Each step lands like a beat from a war drum, measured, rhythmic, inevitable. Then, impact. A hand, a strike. Cassie folds to the ground, not with fear, but with learned reflex. He kicks her, not in rage, in control. The moment doesn't echo off the walls, it lands in your chest like a second heartbeat, cold, irregular, unforgettable. There's no soundtrack, just time-stamped silence and the surveillance lens, not cinematic, clinical, and worse for it. According to a May 2025 broadcast by CNN, which obtained and verified the hotel surveillance footage, airing it didn't just corroborate Ventura's claims, it snapped them into focus. It shattered public doubt. This wasn't gossip, it was evidence. And in every flicker of grain, the truth grew more undeniable. Frame by frame, it pulled back the curtain, not on a moment, but on a pattern. Then came the man who wasn't supposed to matter. Israel Flores, a hotel security guard, invisible by design, stepped into the courtroom and pulled the silence inside out. He spoke of a hallway littered with glass and breathless tension. Cassie Ventura curled against the baseboard like a shadow trying to disappear. And Combs, barefoot, wordless, watching. Ventura's voice was barely a whisper. "Please, I just want to leave." But departure wasn't an option. Flores moved to help. Combs moved faster. No words, just presence. Then, money, folded, quiet, undeniable. A payout pulled from the towel's edge. Not a bribe, a command. Stay silent, walk away, forget. Flores didn't take it. And in that moment, just one man refusing the script, the silence cracked. Not to shatter, a bleed. This wasn't just the unraveling of a public figure. It was the unmasking of a system. The man once hailed as Brother Love now stood in stark contrast to that name, exposed not through gossip, but through grainy footage and sworn testimony. The apology Combs issued, rehearsed, detached.
I was up. I hit rock bottom. But I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video.
"I was disgusted with myself," he said. But courtroom truths don't bend to regret. Evidence does. By September 16, 2024, he was no longer the orchestrator. He was the defendant. Racketeering, sex trafficking, obstruction. A machine 15 years in motion, powered by intimidation and image. Then came Daniel Phillip, a name not in headlines but written into horror. He thought he'd been invited to a celebration. What he entered was a stage, and the script was already written. He testified that he was told to perform and participate in acts that stripped him of choice. Ventura was there but hollowed, sedated, staring through the scene without seeing. Around them, silence. Cameras blinked. Shadows watched, but never stepped in. He spoke of a fear that didn't come from what happened. It came from what might follow. Because in that room, one misstep didn't just ruin you, it erased you. This isn't just a courtroom, it's a stage where power is exposed, and silence undone. Each morning, another silhouette takes the stand, faces blurred, names sealed, voices shaking. They come under protection, but speak without filter. Their stories paint the vault not as metaphor, but as reality. Racks of drives, hours of footage, labeled, time-stamped, weaponized. Not evidence, inventory, not memories, materials. A museum where trauma lives in digital folders and surveillance becomes currency. This wasn't a tech setup. It was a trap with a password. The defense leans on one word, consent. But the prosecution doesn't flinch. They call it what it is, coercion, domination under disguise. Combs' legal team paints him as a man with an unconventional sex life. But every new testimony tears at that narrative, like thread unraveling a designer suit. Then came the shadows, too young to stand alone. Civil rights attorneys revealed a chilling detail: 25 of the 120 claimants are minors. Their voices are sealed, but their presence is undeniable. Their names aren't spoken, but the air changes when they're mentioned. In every pause, in every lawyer's breath before a question, there it is. The weight of what hasn't been said. A silence heavier than testimony. While the outcome of the case remains pending, each new testimony continues to outline a consistent architecture of abuse, surveillance, and psychological control. This wasn't a double life. It was a loop. An endless feed of domination, recorded and reinforced, a cycle masquerading as charisma. And while the cameras kept rolling, the crowd kept clapping. Not everyone was in the room, but the room was always full. Their names now emerge, not on blogs, but in court exhibits. Not in gossip columns, but in evidence logs. Assistants, party coordinators, tour managers, security handlers. Their roles weren't center stage, but their hands were on the machinery. They weren't filming, but they framed it. They scheduled the silence, secured the exits, ensured no one left with more than they arrived with. Not even their voice. This wasn't a scandal, it was an operating system exposed. And when a brand becomes armor, the blowback doesn't just scratch, it shatters. Here, in a courtroom without filters or music cues, the silence Combs once orchestrated now feeds back in violent static. This isn't about fame, it's about infrastructure. Not a man, a machine. The walls weren't built for celebration, they were built for control, and the backstage passes, they led to locked rooms. What looked like legacy was wiring. What sounded like charisma was code. You've been watching Grimvault, where silence doesn't signal closure, it signals activation. And in this case, the machine didn't hide in shadows. It stood center stage. If you're still watching, then you've seen it, the gears, the guards, the game. Ask yourself, who powered it? Who protected it? And when it breaks, who tries to sweep up the pieces? If your heart slowed while watching, don't scroll, speak. This might not be justice, but maybe, just maybe, it's the first crack in the vault. We're not done, not until the last silence ends. Until next time, stay vigilant. Stay relentless, and never mistake quiet for peace.